Mission accomplished.
What is going on? Noble here. I am back for another stream, and today's topic is gay frogs and how it affects the trans community. So for this stream, I'm going to be sharing information that I found about a herbicide called atrazine. This herbicide feminizes, chemically castrates, and turns marine animals transsexual. And I've done a lot of research on this to the point of giving myself arthritis in my eyes. So I'm going to try to use more than 10% of my brain to get through this topic. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking this is some Alex Jones conspiracy theory, or this is some RFK talking point. You know what? They're right. So when you're associating an idea with a face, and if you don't like that face, you might not listen to the topic. And I know this sounds crazy. Like when I first heard about this years ago, I was like, that sounds fucking insane. Like that's fucking stupid, right? So I got some stuff I'd like to show you, and we're going to start with this video here.
We turn to another story.
Yes, now we turn to the story of a University of California scientist who discovered that a popular herbicide may have harmful effects on the endocrine system. Tyrone Hayes was first hired in 1997 by a company that later became agribusiness giant Syngenta. They asked him to study their product, atrazine, a pesticide that is applied to more than half the corn crops in the United States and widely used on golf courses and Christmas tree farms. But after Hayes found results that the manufacturer did not expect, that atrazine causes sexual abnormalities in frogs and could cause the same problems for humans, Syngenta refused to allow him to publish his work. This was the start of an epic feud between the scientist and the corporation.
Now a new article in the New Yorker magazine uses court documents from a class action lawsuit against Syngenta to show how it sought to prevent the Environmental Protection Agency from banning the profitable chemical, which is already banned by the European Union.
All right, so I got some studies about atrazine. This is on PubMed. It's nih.gov. So it's a reliable source, and these articles, you know, they have 100 references sometimes. So with atrazine, the effects on wildlife, particularly amphibians, and the ethically questionable decision-making of members of industry, government, and the legal system, and institutions of higher education, in most cases, in an effort to bend science. Right there. Defined as manipulating research to advance economic, political, or ideological ends. So it's like a pesticide is political. All right, so atrazine, it's the most commonly used pesticide, and it's found in the groundwater, surface water, drinking water, and it's also a potent endocrine disruptor that is active at low ecological relevant concentrations. So the reason I'm saying how this might affect the trans community, because if atrazine is in our groundwater, surface water, drinking water, we're showering it, we're cooking with it, and we have no idea what it's doing to us. And if it's doing this to animals, are you going to think it has zero effect on us? You say, hey, I'm not a frog, or I'm not a fish, so why does it matter to me? Well, actually, this is another NIH PubMed article that says animal testing is sufficient for human biology. So we use animal testing. Like, it's sad, but we definitely do it. And here's another study that says that we do animal testing for cosmetic testing, medical research. So what if that, and there's no study for long-term effects on humans. It hasn't been done, and if it's been done, I can't find it. So are we seriously thinking that's having no effect on us?
start with, the company's public relations team drafted a list of 4 goals. Reporter Rachel Aviv writes, quote, the first was, quote, discredit Hayes. In a spiral-bound notebook, Syngenta's communications manager, Sherry Ford, who referred to Hayes by his initials, wrote that the company could prevent citing of TH data by revealing him as non-credible. He was a frequent topic of conversation at company meetings. Syngenta looked for ways to exploit Hayes' faults, problems. If TH involved in scandal, Enviros will drop him, Ford.
See, that's just sad. They got him to do the research, and then he found stuff that they didn't like, so now they're trying to destroy his life. And then when I bring something like this up, like I've been going to these liberal TikTok live streams where, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're the live streams where they'll have like a background that says, I'm trans, prove me wrong. Or they'll say, I'm a trans woman, I should be allowed to use bathrooms. So anyways, I'm joining those live streams and I'm trying to share the information that I have. Like I got studies like backing it up. Like it's not a Alex Jones conspiracy theory. It's facts, right? And we need to look into it more. But more often than not, I'll join these streams and I'll say, have you ever heard of atrazine? And a lot of them, like most of them have never heard of it. But then the ones that have heard about it, they're like, that's Alex Jones conspiracy theory and I'll get banned. Or like, oh, that's RFK. And this is why they think of it. It actually, like he says, it turns them gay. I think it just turns them transsexual because the male frogs will start producing eggs and then mating with the other male frogs. So whatever, like they're transsexual. It changes their biology to the point where they can start producing eggs. A male frog literally turns female and produces eggs.
Wrote. Well, for more, we're joined by TH himself. That's right. Tyrone Hayes is with us, professor of integrative biology at the University of California, Berkeley, joining us from the campus TV station right now in Berkeley. Welcome to Democracy Now! Can you tell us what happened to you, how you were originally tied to...
What's up, C&J Dev? Good to see you, bud.
Syngenta, the research you did, and what prevented you from originally publishing it?
Well, here at Berkeley, I was a new assistant professor. I was already studying the effects of hormones and the effects of chemicals that interfere with hormones on amphibian development. And I was approached by the manufacturer and asked to study the effects of atrazine, the herbicide, on frogs. And after I discovered that it interfered with male development and caused males to turn into females to develop eggs, the company tried to prevent me from publishing and from discussing that work with other scientists outside of their panel.
What was the process within the company as you raised the...
So the reason I'm saying how this affects the trans community, and I kind of went into it already, what if it's messing with their biology and then everyone's, you know, trying to be nice and affirm. Some people claim to be trans just because they feel left out. But what if this is like a whole manufactured problem because they can manufacture problems? Like, what is it? 40% of the United States is obese now? Like 50 years ago, that was non-existent. But now all these obese people. So I'm comparing that. This thing is manufactured and they are well capable of manufacturing problems and then profiting off it. And then some people say, oh, they don't make that much money off of this because the community is so small. Like, yeah, I guess this community is pretty small, but they 100% make money. The hormones they put children on, like the puberty blockers, is absolutely evil. I don't know why they're doing that, because a child has not fully developed. Like, I'm 36 and I'm still learning stuff. Imagine if I did something when I was young and I completely ruined my life over something. And I've listened to some detransitioners and they say that doctors lied to them and it was so easy to get hormones, and the whole community, they're in their own little bubble. Like I said, I'm joining these live streams and they've never even heard of atrazine. So I'm just saying it's probably
your
manufactured.
findings. What was their immediate reaction to what you had come across?
Well, initially they seemed sort of supportive. We designed more studies, we designed more analysis, and they encouraged me to do more analysis. But as the further analysis just supported the original finding, they became less interested in moving forward very quickly. And eventually they moved to asking me to manipulate data or to misrepresent data.
Wow, that's unreal. They want him to manipulate data. So how much data is being manipulated these days? It's so hard for us to know.
And ultimately, they told me I could not publish or could not talk about the data outside of their closed panel.
And Professor Hayes, talk about exactly what you found. What were the abnormalities you found in frogs, the gender-bending nature of this drug, atrazine?
Well, initially we found that the larynx or the voice box in exposed males didn't grow properly. And this was an indication that the male hormone testosterone was not being produced at appropriate levels. And eventually we found that not only were these males demasculinized or chemically castrated, but they also were starting to develop ovaries or starting to develop eggs. And eventually we discovered that these males didn't breed properly, that some of the males actually completely turned into females. So we had genetic males that were laying eggs and reproducing as females. And now we're starting to show that some of these males actually show, I guess, what we'd call homosexual behavior. They actually prefer.
So C&J Dev says, I'm not sure how many people claim to be trans that aren't. I get it. Some people who claim 23 genders are 20 years old, probably white, college students, and growing up is hard. And it's true. Some people just want to fit in. I'll bring up another study too that says there's a link between autism and gender people who claim gender ideology. They're 6 times more likely to have autism. And this isn't a jab at autistic people, but from what I understand, autism is they don't understand social situations as much as someone who does, as much as someone who's not autistic. And then if we have all these and there's could be autistic, like the vaccines are causing this because like the autism rate has skyrocketed. There could be stuff in the food that might cause it. So we're just affirming delusions. I think we should get them help for gender dysmorphia if they actually feel that way. And there should be an age limit if they want to go on hormones. They shouldn't do it. Puberty blockers are absolutely evil.
Prefer to mate with other males.
And so where did you go with your...
Yeah, C&J Dev says puberty before 10. I've heard that there's some little girls that are going through it at 8 years old. Like there's something going on.
Research.
Well, eventually what happened was the EPA insisted that the Environmental Protection Agency insisted that the manufacturer release me from the confidentiality contract. And we published our findings in pretty high-ranking journals such as Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. We published some work in Nature. We published work in Environmental Health Perspectives, which is a journal sponsored by the National Institutes of Health.
And when did you begin to get a sense that the company was organizing a campaign against you? What were the signs that you saw post the period when you published your findings?
Before we published the findings, and before the EPA became involved, the company tried to purchase the data. They tried to give me a new contract so that they would then control the data and the experiments. They actually tried to get me to come and visit the company to get control of those data. And when I refused, I invited them to the university. I offered to share data, but they wanted to purchase the data. And then they actually, as mentioned in a New York article, they actually hired scientists to try to refute the data or to pick apart the data. And eventually they hired scientists to do experiments that they claim refuted our data, and then that escalated to the company actually, Tim Pasteur in particular, and others from the company coming to presentations or lectures that I was giving to make handouts or to stand up and refute the data, and eventually it even led to things like threats of violence. Tim Pasteur, for example, before I would give a talk would...
So I found this study, like I was saying, and I really only get stuff from PubMed. I know it's because it's a government domain, but it's saying compared to cisgendered individuals, transgender and gender diverse individuals have, on average, a higher rate of autism. So I think that's relevant. And when I bring that up with some, they don't like hearing that, and they think it's offensive. Like hate speech nowadays is just saying facts.
would literally threaten, whisper in my ear that he could have me lynched, or he would, quote, said he would send some of his good old boys to show me what it's like to be.
Yeah, see what I'm talking about. Guru, I'm not trying to spread hate. I'm just bringing up a topic, and I'm just sharing information that I determine is credible. And a lot of people haven't even heard about this stuff. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Be gay, or at one point he threatened my wife and my daughter with sexual violence. He would whisper things like,
I have studies to back all this stuff up too. So atrazine induces complete feminization, chemical castration in male African clawed frogs. And if you say I'm not a frog, well, animal testing is sufficient for human biology, and yeah, it's fine to test on other
your
animals.
wife's at home
And if it's doing this to the wildlife, how can you say with 100% certainty that it's not doing anything to us?
alone right now. How do you know I haven't sent somebody there to take care of her? Isn't your daughter there? So eventually it really slipped into some, pretty scary tactics.
So what did you do? I mean, this is very serious. You could bring criminal charges if you're being threatened and stalked in this way.
Well, initially, I went to my vice chancellor here at the university. I went to my dean. I went to legal counsel here at the university. And I was told by legal counsel that, well, I was told, first of all, by the vice chancellor for research at the time that, well, you published the work, it's over. So I don't understand what the problem is. And I tried to impress upon her, Beth Burns.
Guru, if you're still there, which part is lies? I'm just curious. Which part do you consider is lying? Because he came out with data, and then they tell him to fake the data, and then now they're trying to ruin his life. It's like who's lying? I'm just curious.
At the time that that it wasn't over, that I was really being pursued by the manufacturer. And eventually, when I spoke with the lawyer here at the university, I was told that, well, I represent the university and I protect the university from liability. You're kind of on your own. And I remember I looked at him and I said, but the very university, from the Latin universitas, is a collection of...
Yeah, C&J Dev, I don't know how I feel about it either. This is completely my stance that I'm bringing up the trans community with it as well, and it could be a manufactured problem because we can't even give informed consent because we don't even get... No, Pam, I can see you. How are you doing? Good to see you. But we can't even really give informed consent if they're faking data. And then there's a part in here where they say they want to bend science for atrazine, and then we're listening to the actual scientists that they were trying to bend the data.
Scholars of teaching.
That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to spread hate or what you consider hate. I'm just trying to share information.
And students. So who is this entity, the university, that you represent that doesn't include me? But clearly there's some entity that doesn't really include us, the professors and students, and doesn't really protect our academic freedom, I think, the way that it should.
I wanted to ask you about one of your critics, Elizabeth Whalen, president of the American Council on Science and Health. When the New York Times ran a critical story about the herbicide as part of its Toxic Water series in 2009, she referred to its reporting as, quote, all the news that's fit to scare. This is a clip of Whalen from an interview on MSNBC.
No, Pam, you're here. Can you hear me?
Very much disagree with the New York Times story, which is really raising concerns about a totally bogus risk. Atrazine has been used for more than 50 years. It's very, very tightly regulated. Even the Environmental Protection Agency, which is not known for soft pedaling about environmental chemicals, even they say it's safe.
Well, it turns out that Syngenta has been a long-term financial supporter of Whalen's organization, the American Council on Science and Health, paying them at least $100,000. Your comments on her remarks?
Well, again, they're paid remarks. And one of the most disheartening things in this whole process is that many of my critics, it's one to be academic if you come and say, well, we interpreted the data this way and we want to argue about this point. But these people really didn't even have an opinion. These opinions were written by the manufacturer, and they were paid to put their names on them to endorse the opinions of the manufacturer. So,
So does that not make you suspicious at all that these opinions are paid for? Like, how you can buy a politician, right? Because corporations are allowed to donate to political campaigns. You can buy science too, 100% if you have enough money.
And that's one of the most disheartening things, that they were really just personalities for sale. And many of the things that she's saying there is just not true.
Hey, Cyber Squeak. Yeah, this topic is really complex. I'm not saying this is how it works either. I'm just sharing information that I think is concerning.
True. Any independent study from any scientist that's not funded by Syngenta has found similar problems with atrazine, not just my work on frogs, but I've just published a paper with 22 scientists from around the world, from 12 different countries, who've shown that atrazine causes sexual problems in mammals, and that atrazine causes sexual problems in birds, amphibians, fish. So it's not just my work in amphibians. And also with regards to the EPA, one of the scientific advisory panel members on the EPA that was supposed to review atrazine, turns out, is paid and works for Syngenta. So the whole process was tainted, and in fact, the EPA ignored the scientific advisory panel's opinion and actually decided to keep atrazine on the market and not to do any more studies, when that clearly wasn't the recommendation of the scientific advisory panel.
I wanted to go back a second to your remarks about your university, because obviously there are many questions about major universities around the country being in some way or other supported financially by the pharmaceutical or the drug industry. But you're at a prestigious university, one of the top universities in the country, at Berkeley. Do you have some concerns about how your university responded to in your time of need and the attack on your academic integrity?
Well, they're not just my concerns. There are many at the university who fear that the university is just becoming a corporation. We're a public university that used to get a lot more support from the state. In my lifetime, the tuition was free for students. Tuition's been rising, and it's really an effort to monetize things, and that includes scientific researchers. There's a lot of pressure on us not just to be scholars and to teach and to do research, but also to bring in funds that will support the university. So there's some sentiment from the university that if you are raising a concern potentially that it might cause the university to lose support.
That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to spread hate. I have concerns because I have some young family members that thought they were whatever, and then later in life they decided that, well, like they grew out of it basically. So like I have some concerns, and I'm just bringing stuff up. Also, Alex Jones was going around claiming people who were pedos and got taken off of YouTube. Well, Alex Jones, I don't know about that. Alex Jones is one of the most censored human beings in the world. I don't really trust him. Like, I think he's controlled opposition. I think he gets stuff and he goes and acts like a lunatic. So then when someone else brings it up, you just say, oh, that's an Alex Jones. They were 13 and 10, so they were young, like elementary school. And Alex Jones brings up topics and acts like a lunatic. So then when anyone else brings it up, it automatically gets discredited if it's like an Alex Jones thing. But he's been right about a lot of shit, but he's been wrong.
Support or to lose funders, then you won't necessarily get the support on the campus that you need. And we've seen this over and over again. A colleague of mine, Ignacio Chapella, for example, was in a fairly huge battle over the same company, Novartis, and its influences over scientific research at the university.
Yeah, they are, and I've listened to a lot of stories. Like I found these, I don't recall their names, but there's 4 women that I found, and they all got put on hormones, and it's ruining their life. The one girl, she can never have, like, she got castrated. She can never, not castrated, but she can't have kids. The other woman is incontinent, or I don't know how to pronounce it, but they all have medical issues now from these hormones.
Can you talk about the significance of Syngenta? First of all, is it a significant presence at the university at UC Berkeley? But also the significance of Syngenta as...
And furthermore, they all said the same thing, like how they got lied to. That community is in a bubble where they might not be getting relevant information to make decisions. And the doctors, were handing out hormones. Like it was easier to get hormones than it was to get like other medication. And like just the lies, like I fucking hate liars. Like that's why I watched Lawrence stuff for so long, because I fucking hated his lies, but his lies were entertaining to me. But now I'm just interested in better liars because he's a really bad liar. Now I'm wanting to expose what I consider lies, and these lies are like epic proportions.
It's a pesticide company and all that it makes. How powerful is it?
Well, when I was originally consulting for the manufacturer, they were Novartis at the time, and Novartis had a big influence on the campus. There was a major deal on the campus. I understand a fifth of the biological.
Evil little McNuggets. What about people who detransitioned because the harm that the hormones were causing their bodies, and they stopped taking them for that reason? And it was nothing to do with financial treatment or anything. It was like it was ruining their lives because of the hormones. That happens too.
Biological sciences support was coming from Novartis, and at the time they both made pesticides and they made pharmaceuticals. One of my big concerns is that as of the year 2000, prior to the year 2000, the Novartis not only made atrazine, which is used on corn, of course, which is an herbicide, but it also induces an enzyme called aromatase. It causes you to make too much estrogen. And it's now been shown that this herbicide atrazine and this mechanism is potentially involved in development of breast cancer, for example. Up until 2000, the company also made a chemical called letrozole, which did exactly the opposite. It blocked aromatase, it blocked this enzyme, it blocked estrogen production, and this chemical letrozole is the #1 treatment for breast cancer. So this company was simultaneously in 2000 making a chemical that induced estrogen and promoted breast cancer, and making a chemical that blocked estrogen production and was being used to treat breast cancer. So there's a clear conflict of interest there, a clear problem. The other problems are that something like 90% of the seeds that we use to produce our food right now are owned by the big 6 pesticide companies. So again, there's a conflict of interest where the companies have an interest in I guess, getting us addicted to the pesticides to grow the seeds that they also own. And Syngenta, of course, is one of those big 6, one of the big pesticide or agribusiness companies.
And a New Yorker article that delves into your story also says that you.
Yeah, I agree. Evil little McNuggets. But there's no data that shows that they're any better even after receiving the care. And I've seen things that show that they're more worse off after getting gender-affirming care. And then everyone has a biological clock that's always ticking. Here's my example. When I was in my 20s, I never wanted kids. Then I hit 30 years old. I woke up one day, I was like, shit, it's a feeling. Like there's a biological clock that's always ticking. And then what if these people are making these decisions at really young ages because they're getting full of propaganda, and then they change their biology for life, and then later on in life they determined that was a mistake. But I just don't like how there's all these lies and propaganda, and these kids are so young. Like there's stories of like 4-year-olds telling their parents that they're trans. How does that make sense? Like it's a 4-year-old. And then if there was I have a family member who was young, and we kind of knew he was going to be gay when he grew up, and it's not a big deal. Like but nowadays they would have told him that he's trans and put him on hormones. Like that's what I'm against, is puberty blockers or giving any kind of chemical to kids. It's absolutely wrong. And if they bend science, if this guy's talking about how they don't like his results and they're going to pay him to say something else, like who knows the other shady shit that's going on.
Find out that the company was also reading your emails. Could you talk about that?
Well, I had some suspicion that they had hacked into my email, and I originally found out there was a professor at Minnesota, and I was going there to give a big lecture, and this professor in the School of Public Health.
I don't know anything about that steroid. I just know that atrazine was turning, and I don't even want to say it turns them gay. It actually turns them transsexual. It completely changes their biology and their physiology, where the male frogs start producing eggs. That's pretty fucked up. And that's in all of our groundwater, surface water, drinking water. I have all the studies to say it. So how are we going to say that there's no effect on us?
Deb Dubinoski said that she happened to be standing in line at the airport flying back to Minnesota, and just by coincidence she was standing behind somebody who was having a conversation on his cell phone and who identified himself as an employee of Syngenta, and he made the statement, we have access to his email, we know where he is at all times. So it wasn't just paranoia on my part. I had direct evidence that they had access to my email. And at the time, I maintained a second and a third email that I could keep private. And I actually used that information that they had access to my email to send them information, and sometimes false information. For example, booking plane tickets through that email, because then I could send them to the wrong place, so they wouldn't necessarily be there to follow me when I was going to school.
Yeah, it could be rare, but do we have credible data? Like, what if there's more detransitioners and they're just hiding that? Because this guy's talking about hiding data. This is just atrazine, right? I'm just looping it into the trans community, because what if this is changing our biology without even knowing, right? We don't give consent for any of this shit. And it's in all of our groundwater, surface water, drinking water. We bathe in it, we cook with it.
Speak in other places.
I mean, Professor Hayes, this is stunning stuff that came out in this class action suit. The suit wasn't brought by you, but the documents that came out that referenced you, Tyrone Hayes, TH, and trying to discredit you, trying to discredit your family. That was a lawsuit that involved atrazine contaminating water supplies. But what was your reaction when you saw this? You suspected this. You felt you were being followed. You felt they were trying to discredit you. But now you had the documents.
Well, it's funny. The way the article reads that, I suspected. I mean, I knew Tim Pester. I knew Sherry Ford. I knew many of the individuals who would follow me around.
Yeah, I heard it was banned too, but who knows if that's true. But yeah, like other countries too, they don't have like these crazy vaccine programs that North America has. Like, I'm in Canada, but we have the same amount of like mandatory vaccines. And there's other countries that don't even have, like, I saw this one video where this doctor was saying that there's like 30 new vaccines a year or something. Other countries only do like 4 or 5. Like, I don't know why we're pumped full of vaccines.
I knew who they were. I knew they had access to my email. So for me, I knew that these things were happening. This guy would directly come up and make lewd comments to me and threatening comments to me.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I agree with that. And like, furthermore, how are we supposed to know that it's having no effect on us? They haven't done a study with humans. They probably will never do a study on humans. But how are we supposed to know that it's not doing anything to us if it's so wide, if it's around so much?
But it was the kind of thing where, it sounded like something out of a movie. I couldn't go and tell my colleagues, like, they're following me around and, they're hacking into my email.
Did you put on a tape recorder?
What I found, here's how I'll answer that question. What I found out.
And again, I'm not trying to spread hate. I have these studies that I've read, and like all this stuff is credible in my opinion. It has like hundreds of 146 references for that one. And even in this study, they say that they bend science. Government institutions have institutions of higher education. And it's political too. Like, it's political and ideological, and it's a pesticide. And if they're trying to silence him so bad, like, it's got to be bad. Like, I look at people who get silenced and whistleblowers, and I tend to believe most of them if it's not ridiculous. But if someone's getting silenced, it's for good reason. Like, how they killed the guy who made the water engine? They've actually killed a few people who've made water-powered engines, and or they've killed UFO alien whistleblowers and stuff. Like,
it was much more powerful for me to suggest and have them think that I recorded everything than for them to actually know what I recorded. And that actually became sort of my protection. So when this guy came up and threatened me and threatened my wife, to then go back and go, oh my God, did he record that or not? So it was much more powerful for me to have them think that. But you can see in their handwritten notes that they were very concerned that I was recording conversations. There's notes that they wanted to trap me, to entice me to sue, and these kinds of things. And my reaction now, to see it all in the New Yorker and for all this open for the world to see, is there are two reactions. One is, I can't believe they wrote these kinds of things down, right? That you're plotting to investigate me and investigate my school and investigate my hometown and all these kinds of things, and you wrote it down. But my other response is, this is quite analogous to, when you hear these stories of somebody who's been in jail for murder for 10 years and then the DNA evidence gets them out, and you ask them, are you happy? Well, of course I'm happy. but I've also been in jail for 10 years, you know what I mean? So of course I'm happy now that these documents have all been revealed, but it's also been a very difficult time for me and for my family, for the last 10 to 15 years, for my students as well, for the last 10 to 15 years to be pursued this way and to be under a microscope this way and to be feel threatened this way for so long.
As we wrap up, what's happening with atrazine today? Where does it stand?
It's still on the market. We're still studying it. A number of studies are still coming out from around the world. One recent study has shown that male babies that are exposed in utero to atrazine, their genitals don't develop properly. Their penis doesn't develop properly, or they get microphallas. There's studies showing that sperm count goes down when you're exposed to atrazine. And this is not just laboratory.
Okay, I was wanting to hear that. I didn't know if there was anything on it, but yeah, that's crazy.
Animals or animals in the wild. This is also humans. We use the same hormones that animals do for our reproduction, and it's a big threat to environmental health and public health.
I want to thank you very much for being with us, Tyrone.
I got one more thing that I want to show. It's going to be a short stream. I just wanted to kind of get back in the streaming mood because I got some others. I want to do a stream on weather modification because I've found some patents dating back to the 1800s for weather modification. I want to do, another stream on just food because the food's poison, the water's tainted, and the sky is toxic. And I got some information. So I guess pesticides or vaccines wasn't really relevant to this one, but I just want to show you that they make a lot of fucking money off vaccines, like a lot of money.
Millions for vaccines and save millions of lives. If you just kind of invert that and say, no, we're trying to make money from vaccines and not trying to save lives, that's a popular conspiracy theory.
You've invested $10 billion in vaccinations over the last 2 decades, and you figured out the return on investment for that, and it kind of stunned me. Can you walk us through the math?
Over a 20-to-1 return. So if you just look at the economic benefits, that's a pretty strong number compared to anything else.
No, we're trying to make money from vaccines, and that's a popular conspiracy theory.
Over a 20-to-1 return.
20-to-1, like that's crazy. Like I can go invest in Pfizer stock or like Moderna stock or something. I don't get 20-to-1 on my return. How the fuck does that work? Mr. Moore, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Yeah, oh yeah, I could do a flat Earth stream too because I found a lot of stuff on that. I don't know what I believe. Like we're being lied to every single day, and I'm just some retard on the internet with an opinion, so I don't really know what's true or not. But I can see I like reading studies. Like PubMed is probably the only place I'll trust. It's an actual NIH government domain, and I know the last place I want to trust is the government. But if you read it, like there's some studies that I think are relevant.
Amphibians. There is currently insufficient. It did everything in its power to aid the primary registrant of atrazine, Syngenta, in keeping atrazine on the market. Let me explain how. During the first risk assessment in 2003, the EPA's review wasn't comprehensive. It was limited to 17 studies in total. Out of those 17 studies, 12 of them were funded by Syngenta, and only 2 of them found no adverse effects. After reviewing these studies, the EPA concluded that although there is sufficient evidence to formulate a hypothesis that atrazine exposure may impact gonadal development in amphibians, there is currently insufficient data to confirm or refute the hypothesis. Okay, so here's where the fuckery starts. Then the EPA said that they required additional studies, especially one that could replicate Tyrone Hayes' research. And guess who they relied on to conduct these studies? Well, Syngenta Crop Protection, of course. Not only was Syngenta responsible for testing its own product, it also put together a list of good laboratory practices, which all studies subsequently had to follow in order to be considered by the EPA. The EPA even admits in its 2007 amphibian white paper that it was Syngenta who provided the agency with the signed and finalized version of the study protocol. Sure, the EPA made decisions here and there, but they pretty much just left it up to Syngenta to create these test protocols based on their recommendations. This occurred after a former tobacco lobbyist and anti-regulation czar named Jim Tozy used a 2-sentence rider called the Data Quality Act, which he authored, by the way, and he used it to throw a wrench into the EPA's regulatory process of atrazine. The Data Quality Act is often used by special interest groups to challenge the legitimacy of scientific studies, which is exactly what happened in the case of atrazine. Citing the Data Quality Act, Tosi petitioned the EPA saying two things. One, that they don't have validated test methods for determining whether or not atrazine causes endocrine disruption. Two, he wrongly argued that the findings that atrazine caused endocrine effects had not been reproduced in any other studies. Anyway, so, the EPA then told Syngenta to create the testing methods and to conduct their own studies. After running two parallel tests and submitting them as one study, Syngenta returned to the EPA with the results. And lo and behold, Syngenta found that atrazine had no adverse effects. Because Syngenta collaborated with the EPA in designing the Good Laboratory Practice protocols for assessing hormonal disruption in frogs, the EPA then said that every study has to follow those protocols, and any study that doesn't is going to be thrown out. The Environmental Protection Agency then threw out every single study in the open literature because they did not meet those Good Laboratory Practice protocols. Even studies conducted before the Good Laboratory Practice guidelines were set by Syngenta were retroactively considered to be either qualitative or invalid by the EPA. That's 36 studies in total, which suddenly don't meet the criteria to be considered robust enough to be used to make a regulatory decision. And the only reason they weren't considered robust enough is because they didn't follow these protocols made by Syngenta. So in the end, before the EPA made their conclusion in 2007, only one study remained that was considered to be quantitative and eligible to be the basis of a regulatory decision. And that study was funded by Syngenta Crop Protection.
What we could talk about for a minute that might be helpful, though, is this good laboratory practice business.
Yeah. So explain that.
Well, I evidently don't do good laboratory practice. What it's allowed industry and kind of naysayer people to say is, well, they don't do good laboratory work. We do.
It's a misnomer, right?
What's that?
It's a misnomer.
Well,
to call it good laboratory practices when it's just checks and balances, basically. So they don't...
Yeah, it's being used to tar and feather people who don't have the money to do the work the way that industry does. But the fact of the matter is that you can do everything that it says in a good laboratory practice manual and have garbage science.
So on the basis of a single Syngenta-funded study, which was a complete outlier finding virtually no adverse effects even at high doses of atrazine, the EPA concluded in 2007 that atrazine causes no adverse effects on frogs and that no additional testing was warranted to address the issue. EPA convened a scientific advisory panel made up of independent experts to help them form a conclusion. However, the EPA didn't really have to accept their advice. And a lot...
So that's really all I wanted to get into for this stream. I'll probably end it soon, but just sharing information. I've joined a lot of TikTok live streams to debate people, and a lot of people haven't even heard of this stuff, and I think it's very concerning. And then clearly there's lies and manipulated data, and we don't know the truth. I'm not claiming to know everything, but like I said, it's in all the groundwater, surface water, drinking water. We bathe in it. We cook with it. It's doing this to African clawed frogs. There's actually a new study that showed that soy is feminizing fish. The study came out of China. Also, I have a study that says that there's a link between transgenderism and autism. So that the LGBT had on average a higher rate of autism than cis people. You'd say it that way. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring up this topic because I think it's concerning. I've had some family members that have been affected by it. I'm going to do stuff on the moon landing because I don't think it happened. And I know I look like this when I bring up the moon landing, but that's fine. I think there's a lot of compelling evidence that shows it's full of shit. But anyways, thank you for joining the live stream. It was good to see some names I haven't seen for a while. And yeah, I'm going to end it there.